Welcome back, everyone. Okay, we're coming back into the room. I hope you enjoyed those breakout discussions. I know I just did with my group. We are now going to take a 30-minute break, a lunch break, and when we return, we're going to hear from several program practitioners and experts from the field on different models. So do watch the time, come back in 30 minutes, enjoy the break, and thank you so much for being with us today. We'll see you soon. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to repeat this message in case people are coming back right now. We're going to take a 30-minute break. So enjoy. Do come back in 30 minutes because we have wonderful program models we're going to be exploring. So thank you again for being with us, and we will see you in 30 minutes. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. We hope you had a nice break. And we are now going to move from a focus on data and research to shining a light on 6 different program models for active aging, each of which is contributing to building a movement, a set of practices, and a philosophy of life for older adults that is based on human worth, connection, and wholeness. Our goal with this next segment is for you to leave today with new models, ideas, and strategies that are directly transferable to your own communities. As you listen to these speakers, please again feel free to submit questions in real time for the presenters in the chat. We will turn to a Q&A right after we hear about the programs. The first 3 program models we will delve into now share a common mission to reimagine and redesign what modern and active aging looks like. We will first hear from Susan Lecter and Rabbi Brian Fink of the Wexler Center for Modern Aging at the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan, as also one of today's partners for the convening. Susan Lecter is the director of the Wexler Center for Modern Aging, and Rabbi Brian Fink is the director of the Engage Jewish Service Corps at the center. Engage is an initiative that recruits and empowers volunteers in their 50s and beyond. Thank you, Susan and Rabbi Fink, for sharing a little bit of the center's history, story, and programs with our audience today. And I'm going to now turn it over to you.
Hello, everybody. So wonderful to be here. This has been such a fantastic day so far. The JCC has really been delighted to be partners with B3 Jewish Boomer Platform and JFNA in bringing forth the convening today. And it's been a joy to work in close contact with both Stuart and David in the details and planning. I salute both of them and all their efforts in producing an exceptional day. It's also really wonderful to be together with colleagues from across the country doing this work, and so pleased to be connecting and look forward to connecting more in the future. So our first slide. Perfect. So my colleague, Rabbi Brian Fink, and I will present some of our work to you today. I'll give you an overview of the center and its goals, and Brian will hone in on a couple of examples of some of our initiatives. So I've been at the JCC for almost 17 years, and I've been working with active agers during that entire time. During the pandemic, we saw an increased engagement across the board in all of our programming, which was of course virtual. And we had the very special opportunity of naming the 10th Center of Excellence at the JCC, the Wexler Center for Modern Aging. We spent a lot of time talking about the name, the mission, and vision. Ultimately, the center seeks to reimagine older adulthood in a Jewish communal setting as a time of expansive possibility, purpose, community engagement, mutual support, and blessing. Next slide, please. The graphic displayed here really illuminates the different tenets of the center, and these are our areas of focus as we think about our work in the field of modern aging. We have a variety of in-person programming, which we've been running for many, many years. We have virtual programming now simultaneous to the in-person. We've brought people back now into the building, but we are continuing our virtual center, and we're doing much hybrid programming as well as we learn to refine that technology. We have a focus on our cognition module, with offerings designed to focus on memory enhancement and sharpening the brain. We prioritize fitness and wellness with a lot of exercise classes and look at the well-being for optimal health. We focus on healthy aging research. We do regular scans in the area of healthy aging to understand and implement best practices in the field. We have begun, before the pandemic, we were very interested in developing our caring initiatives and have honed in on those since the pandemic, and really to foster social connectedness and support our older adults as they age in place. Technology education has always been a very important and priority area in our offerings and continues to be that. And volunteer engagement is very important to us. It's really one of our prime pieces, and we're going to talk more about that as we move along. Next slide, please. So the goals of all initiatives at the Wexler Center for Modern Aging are to increase a sense of autonomy, independence, and positive interdependence, to bolster a sense of purpose, usefulness, and value to the community, to decrease social isolation, to improve modern agers' personal outlook and their emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being, to ensure a low threshold for enrollment and easy access to programming to promote long-term ongoing participation, and lastly, to keep modern agers connected to the broader JCC community through intergenerational engagement opportunities, institution-wide celebrations and observances, and civic involvement. Next slide, please. The model for significant engagement at the Wexler Center is peer leadership and volunteerism. We have a variety of peer advisory committees that really steer our work, and the involvement is at all levels of creation, implementation, and evaluation of our initiatives. An example of that is our Symposium on Positive Aging Committee, a group of active volunteer leaders, retired professionals who have been putting together our signature event for the last 7 years. And we have many peer-led groups and programs, such as our social and political discussion groups, support groups, other social groups where peer leadership model has been at the core. I'm going to pass it along to Brian now, and he'll illustrate this model with some examples from our initiatives.
So great. Thanks, Susan. I think that, focusing first in on technology, I think that our technology and our volunteers were how we were able to successfully pivot during the pandemic. We had a two pre-existing tech groups that are slightly different. The TechSoup Volunteer Project was created by one volunteer leader to have active agers help their peers and slightly older folks at senior centers learn how to use their computers and smartphones more effectively. And then we had the longstanding senior tech program that offered computer classes at the JCC. And when the pandemic occurred, these volunteers jumped right into action. They learned how to use Zoom. We first taught them how to use it. They taught each other how to use it. And then we began teaching our community how to use Zoom. And through that, we had many Zoom tutorials. We had these volunteers supporting our discussion groups and other programs that used to meet in person, then transitioned to Zoom almost seamlessly. And then they made themselves available for one-on-one assistance. And this is continuing to evolve as the pandemic has evolved, and hopefully it's on its downswing. But we know that technology is a really important gateway to help people continue to stay engaged and stay connected to the world and stay connected to each other. And the peer-to-peer model has been essential for this, because it takes away the stigma and it lets people help people of their same age, their same background, and lets people learn new skills and grow in this stage of their life. This is another really exciting, innovative program that we started during the pandemic. This is called English Overseas. We've partnered with the municipality of Jerusalem in Israel, and we place active ager volunteers one-on-one with high school students from Jerusalem, usually sophomores, juniors, and seniors, to help them practice English. And they practice together once a week over Zoom for about 20 to 40 minutes each to help them get better at their end of year exam. And this has been such an amazing program that there's so much interest. We have over 140 volunteers who participated in this, both a lot from the New York City area, but then we've had other random volunteers contact us from other parts of the country and have joined up with us. And this has definitely been something that new people have come to us to join our initiatives who were not part of us previously, who may not have been part of active Jewish communities so much before. Then they hear about this from a friend and they opt into it. This program has been really interesting because it creates a sense of immediacy and personal connection. You know that you're making a difference. You have a sense of cultural connection and travel, through the program. And it's something that exists virtually, right? And while we're playing around with possibly having an Israel trip sometime next year, this is going to continue as a virtual program because that's what it's designed for, right? This is another example of a micro community within our Wexler Center. This is the JCC is on the west side of Manhattan, and we have a bunch of participants who live on the east side. And even before the pandemic, they were interested in self-organizing themselves to do stuff on the east side. Great. Pandemic hit. They continued to meet together, the leaders, and they came up with innovative stuff to do together on Zoom. And now they're figuring out what things they're comfortable doing in person, such as the gathering in the park that you're picturing here. So again, micro communities and bringing people together in small groups has been an important part of our strategy for the Wexler Center in many different ways. As Susan mentioned, even before the pandemic, we were looking at ways of how we can help members of our community continue to stay connected with each other and care about each other. We have a project called Living Well Together, which is in many ways, it's similar to aspects of Kai Village that I think Laura Geller is going to talk about in a few minutes. But the members of this subgroup help each other with medical needs, share referrals, and gather together in small groups, another way of connection, right? So that they're in place to help them if something were to come up, if they have those needs. We started to make caring calls throughout the pandemic. We've done 8 rounds so far. We've had volunteers, most of them are active ager volunteers who are calling their peers and sometimes folks a little bit older to check in on them to see how they're doing. And as needs have been identified, which are different now than they were 2 years ago, but then we're in a position to figure out how we're going to respond to those, because we are a community that cares about each other, and we want to be a community that people can continue to stay connected with when there's issues of accessibility that otherwise they would feel kind of left out. And so the caring calls and Living Well Together are 2 ways that we've been able to do that. As the goal is to keep people in our community as long as possible, to continue to allow them to age in place. So we really want to thank you, and we look forward to discussing things in more detail. Our contact information is on the bottom of the slide. And, we're really happy to have this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Fink. Thank you, Susan. Really appreciate that presentation. And I love just the whole idea of micro communities as a strategy and how specific and targeted those are. So more to say on that. It is now my pleasure to welcome Rabbi Laura Geller, who is the Rabbi Emerita from Temple Emmanuel of Beverly Hills, co-founder of High Village LA, chair of the Synagogue Village Network, and co-editor of Getting Good at Getting Older. She is also a B3 board member. Rabbi Geller will share the story of High Village and how it came into being and the impact it is having on so many older adults. Over to you, Rabbi.
Thank you, and thanks to those who brought us together. This convening is long overdue. So you see my slides. Years ago, as I was beginning to think of my retirement from Temple Emmanuel of Beverly Hills, I noticed that at least a quarter of my congregants, maybe even more, were boomers or slightly beyond, and many were leaving the synagogue. I also understood that they were in a new stage of life that didn't exist for their parents and grandparents. That stage between midlife, when they raised their families and built their careers, and frail old age. This stage, as you all know, could be as long as 30 years, years not tacked on to the end of their life, but right here, right now, as active older adults. So with the help of talented lay leaders, we organized the listening campaign, where we engaged over 250 congregants in small gatherings to discuss 3 questions. Slide number 2, please. The questions were, how do you feel about this new stage? The second question was, what keeps you up at night? What gets you up in the morning? What are your fears? What are your hopes? And the third is, has the Jewish community been there for you at this stage? And what would it look like if it were? So people expressed sadness that Jewish institutions like federations, JCCs, and synagogues seemed only interested in a narrow vision of ensuring the Jewish future, focusing on families with young children and millennials, and ignoring them as active older adults. They believe that they too are part of the Jewish future, keepers of memory, talented, experienced, but so often ignored. There were 4 fears. The fears were becoming isolated, becoming invisible, being without purpose, and becoming dependent. Most of them wanted to age in place. That is, they wanted to stay in their homes as long as possible. So research after the listening campaign led us to imagine a village model. Slide 3, please. I won't read the slide. There's too much stuff on it, but you should check it out on the v2vnetwork.org. Villages began in Beacon Hill in Boston in 2001, when neighbors who wanted to continue to live in their own homes got together and decided to create what amounts to a homeowners association on steroids, creating neighbor-to-neighbor services and the opportunity for a deeply engaged social community. Now there are 200 neighborhood villages around the country. There are 200 more in formation. The model has been studied, and data indicates that village members experience reduced isolation, increased independence, and an enhanced purpose of life. And we all know that this is particularly important now as we become aware that loneliness is a serious public health epidemic. Slide number 4. So, long story short, 6 years ago, we created High Village LA, the first synagogue-based village in the country. All of these other villages are neighborhood villages. We are a synagogue village. It's a partnership between 2 Reform synagogues, and it's been a game changer for the active older adults who have become members of the village, and also for the 2 synagogues, because we decided that in order to be a member of High Village LA, you must be a member of either of the synagogues. Slide number 5. It turns out that active older adults who were leaving our congregations stayed as members because they wanted to be a part of the village. And non-members actually joined the synagogue in order to be part of the village. So you see from slide 6, whatever this one is, that the village strengthens the synagogue with the energy, the talent, and the resources of these older adults. And it's also led to real partnership between two synagogues that once were competitors. Slide number 7. Our experience with Chai Village was so powerful that we decided to see if we could help other synagogues explore this model. So we created the Synagogue Village Network. You can see the mission of the Synagogue Village Network on this slide. 4 years ago, we brought together synagogue clergy and lay leaders in the Los Angeles area to learn about this model. And then we offered consulting services to those congregations who were interested and appeared ready to begin. We hired an extremely talented consultant, David Levy, who is on the call. You can learn more about him on our website. And he works on the ground with these synagogues. Now there are 3 synagogues near Los Angeles, in addition to Chai Village LA, that have formed villages. One is a partnership between a Reform and a Conservative synagogue, and then there are 2 individual synagogues who are creating their own village. Rabbi Beth Lieberman, who's also on the call, is a lay leader at one of those synagogues, or Ami. As we have been working, and we've also, and this is really important, we've been working with the Jewish Federation on Long Island. They reached out to us, and they have, with us, facilitated 1 new village there on Long Island, and there are 2 more in formation. So for federations that want to work with synagogues, this is a really innovative model. And if we can imagine a kind of partnership, we could make a difference in communities around the country. I also suspect, although we have not tested it yet, that the notion of a village might also work with JCCs, but that's something that is still evolving. So slide 10, after 1 year, leaders of these synagogues, these new villages, the leaders report that people have made new friends, they feel more confident about the future, they were able to teach and learn from each other, and they had a sense of belonging to a larger group, and also, and this is also important, felt more connected to their synagogues and felt a greater sense of purpose. So slide 11, it notes where there are synagogue villages now. And I invite you to go to the Synagogue Village Network website, where there are a few very short videos where village members of these different villages describe their experience. And there's some more information about what a synagogue village could be. The important thing to know about a village is that it's not simply programming for active adults. It's about creating relationships and building community. And each synagogue has created its own version of a village that responds to the particular culture of their synagogue. So it's not one model that works for everything. It's the village itself and the village leaders who determine what it's going to be. And again, I think that that's a model that could work with JCCs and other Jewish projects. The final statement, the final slide, this statement from the Chai Village website, the statement from the Chai Village website captures why all this is important. We're changing the paradigm of what it means to grow older, from one of decline to one of possibility. And I was really struck by what Dr. Pike said about changing the narrative. We're changing the narrative, and that is so important because the story that we tell will definitely have an impact on the way we grow older. So a synagogue village is not for everyone, but for those who want to explore it. And it is an antidote to those 4 fears: One is no longer isolated. One is no longer invisible. You're seen as the skilled and energetic person you are, even though you may no longer be working in the roles you once occupied. You have purpose because villages give you the opportunity to serve instead of be served. And that, I think, is really important. People want to serve. They don't want to be served. It enables you to provide services for other members and also to be involved in the larger effort to combat ageism, and also to explore with other generations the issues of social justice through the partnerships that a village can create. And finally, a village reminds us that no one is ever independent. Throughout our lives, we move through a balance between dependence and independence. And the secret to getting good at getting older is to nurture an appreciation of interdependence that can provide meaning, purpose, and joy to our lives.
Beautiful, just beautiful, Rabbi Geller. Thank you so much for that. And the power of the village model and the traditions and the rituals and the culture of villages, and the point you're making that the village, the people of the village themselves determine the nature of that village. Thank you so much for that. It is now my pleasure to introduce Steph Caridio. Steph is the manager of Age Well Baltimore at the Associated, and she is going to share details about the Age Well model and some of their plans for the future. Steph, you're up.
Thank you, Jess. Hi, everyone. I'm absolutely delighted to have the opportunity to talk about Age Well Baltimore as it exists currently, and also to share some of our dreams and plans for the future, including engagement beyond human services delivery. So I wanted to first start by explaining that Age Well Baltimore is actually one of several Age Wells across the nation. So you can see here, this is all the communities that have their own version of Age Well. And a huge shout out goes in particular to Pittsburgh, where Age Well actually started over 20 years ago, would you believe? You know, we're each at a different stage in our Age Well journey, and we have each tailored the model to our own community, just as we were hearing about the villages being, you know, tailored. And we have an amazing cohort who meet regularly to share learnings. So today I'm going to focus on Age Well Baltimore specifically. So when I say Age Well, I'm really referring to Age Well Baltimore. So for us, our journey started several years ago with an extensive planning process, and really in response to all those trends and data around aging and caregiving that you're familiar with and you're learning even more about today. And we really recognized that we needed to create an integrated system to ensure that our older adults live safe, healthy, and most importantly, active, engaged, and meaningful lives. So fast forward, and we officially launched Age Well Baltimore just over a year ago. So I'm sure you're thinking, you know, what is it? So Age Well Baltimore is a network of coordinated and collaborative services for older adults, their families, loved ones, and of course their caregivers or care partners, as we prefer to say. Or in other words, it's a coordinated community response to support healthy aging. So for us, the network is a joint initiative of 4 founding partners. So we have the Associated, the Jewish Federation of Baltimore, and that's where I sit in the planning department. We have HI, our Community and Housing Development Agency. We have HANA, our Domestic Violence and Elder Abuse Agency. And of course, Jewish Community Services, JCS, our Social Services Agency. So when I'm talking about Age Well, I'm talking about all the services and programs that exist in that network. Currently, there are over 40. I'm talking about how the Age Well model makes it streamlined for community members to access and navigate all those services. And I'm also talking about how the Age Well partners work together to create efficiencies, develop new programming, and strategize collaboratively about how to best support community members to age well. One of the key components of Age Well is that we created a one-stop shop, single point of entry to make it easier to access all the services in the network. So this resource includes an information, referral, and assistance line that gets callers seamlessly connected to all the Age Well partners. And it also includes a website with consolidated resources that are categorized by need rather than by agency. So in addition to the centralized single point of entry model, we're also working towards, many of you might be familiar with the term no wrong door model. So that's where, for example, a fitness instructor can make a referral to a career coach when a member of the Meyerberg just happens to mention that she's interested in an encore career or starting her own business. Or maybe it's a therapist who can get a client seamlessly connected to NNC. NNC is our village model for socialization and support for aging in community. So what we're really doing is that we're working towards a vision where all professionals have a holistic, person-centered and system-wide lens to empower individuals to thrive in elderhood and also, moreover, to prevent community members from falling through the cracks. So we have some resources. We created a staff training manual, a consolidated directory of resources, and we facilitate a monthly gather and learn session where we take a deep dive into all the services in the network to discuss best practices for working with older adults. And most importantly, facilitate team and relationship building, because that's the secret sauce of Age Well. As you can imagine, there are many complexities of bringing together and integrating three unique and equally important agency cultures and processes. But from the outset, Age Well has been created collaboratively and of course with equal buy-in from all partners. And planning has included professionals from agency execs to frontline staff. And the collaboration includes creating and implementing an extensive marketing campaign so that we're reaching even more older adults. And our marketing plan included hosting 2 very well attended virtual community events that focused on future trends in aging and preparing for the future in an intentional way. You know, fostering a data-driven culture not only gives us a North Star, moreover, it allows us to increase individual and community impact. And the data we collect will also help us to coordinate future growth, such as designing collaborative initiatives to reduce duplication and address gaps in service delivery, as well as to strengthen shared funding opportunities. You know, actually at the moment, we're exploring a coordinated transportation initiative, and we're actually using the results of a survey that focused on the daytime transportation needs of older adults to help guide our next steps. We also understand the importance of including the end user in the design of Age Well. So over the next few months, we have plans for surveys and focus groups with staff, older adults, and care partners. Age Well Baltimore is focused on addressing all aspects of well-being, you know, and as we think about individuals in a holistic, person-centered way, we know that we can't silo needing services and engagement. And in fact, throughout our lifespan, both are important, and aging is such a dynamic process. There are currently several services focused on socialization in Age Well, yet there's so much more happening across the family of agencies supported by the Associated. So we're actually really excited to be approaching the next phase of Age Well and thinking about bringing on additional partners who offer opportunities to strengthen Jewish life. And thinking of, you know, family camps, grandparent connectors, volunteerism, social justice and advocacy, environmentalism, Jewish education, and even spirituality, to name but a few. You know, and what's so great about these opportunities is that so many of them are not age specific. And, you know, creating more opportunities for intergenerational and moreover, multi-generational programming around shared interests and passions, that's what's going to foster age-inclusive societies and support our mission to promote positive age beliefs, and break down those ageist stereotypes and myths about growing older. At the core of Age Well is celebrating the wisdom and contributions of our elders. So I know that was a very quick overview, but I hope that has given you a little bit of an insight into the Age Well model. You know, it's still early days and a work in progress. But of course, the key element that underscores Age Well's success is continued collaboration, communication, and planning with current and future partners. And all of this work is moving us towards our vision, which is a community that supports all individuals to thrive and age well, to achieve their full potential through maintaining a high quality of life and well-being and living with security and self-determination. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Steph. That was terrific. And I am now going to welcome back all our speakers. Welcome back, Rabbi Geller, Susan, Rabbi Fink. This is now, once again, we have questions coming into the chat, so we're going to go right to those, but we will have 15 minutes to hear from you, the participants, any questions you have that are bubbling up. This is your opportunity. So I am looking at the chat and I'm having the wonderful help of my colleague, Sophie. It looks like for all speakers, the question was, the 3 programs discussed exist in large Jewish communities. And wondering, you know, how you would think about any thoughts on how to scale down for smaller communities. And perhaps we could start, sorry, who wants to start? Who wants to take that on? How to scale for smaller communities. Okay, we'll start with Rabbi Geller and then we'll go to Rabbi Fink. Thank you.
With the villages that we have helped create, one is in a community where there's one major synagogue, or there's a synagogue. There isn't a partnership, and that synagogue is doing it on its own. Rabbi Beth Lieberman is on this call, and she is a lay leader at that synagogue, which is in Calabasas or someplace that is, you know, not a part of the center of Los Angeles. So again, the model could be done, particularly if there is a possibility of a partnership between a synagogue and a federation, or a synagogue and a JCC. It's the notion of asking people what they want to create a more intense kind of community.
Mm-hmm. Terrific. Rabbi Fink.
Yeah, I think that Laura did a great job of the general gist of it, is that it's about engagement and empowerment. It's about gathering together your existing leaders and people who could be leaders, and asking what they want to do, figuring out where the low-hanging fruit are, figure out where their opportunities are to co-create something, and then you can build off of that. Whether it is, you know, a volunteer project, whether it's, you know, skill-based, whether it's group volunteering somewhere else, whether it's to enhance the discussions and programs that you have at a JCC or a synagogue, and when somebody proposes an idea that you first think is a little bit outside the box, but they're really excited about it, figure out how to say yes and then let them co-lead it. And then that will tend to take off a little bit.
Terrific.
I would just add to what Brian said, and I think what we experience a lot is the high touch, speaking to each and every person. It's not just about gathering a group together, it's about the listening to each person. We can't necessarily realize every person's ideas, but we can listen and open a dialogue. And that's the first step.
Yeah.
And I can just mention something else. So for us, Age Well Baltimore was really modeled on a lean startup process. So everything that we did, we started small, you know, with pilot processes, so we could really test how everything was working and then be able to get feedback so we could iterate and pivot. So our plan was always to have more partners, but we started with, you know, the core partners who are serving our older adults. So I think that model could be replicated no matter the size of the community.
So I want to say one more thing about villages. I mean, if you're in a small community, but there's a church that you would want to have a relationship with, or a community organization. I mean, anything is possible if people themselves decide this is what they want. I think even slightly different from Susan, it's not us listening to what people want. It's them it's them talking to each other about what they want and them deciding. It's not about empowering, because that it implies that we can empower them. It is about acknowledging the skills, resources, energies, and abilities, and giving the spaciousness for that to take place.
And Susan's nodding right on. Yes. Terrific. Another question. Thank you for everyone. I'm reading off my other computer here. How are these programs funded? Besides a synagogue membership, is there additional associated fee structure to belong to any of these programs? Whoever wants to jump in.
So in terms of the village, we do ask people to join the village, but we know that they're already a member of a synagogue, and so we keep the membership very low. And in fact, people who can't afford to pay, you know, it's really not a problem. So we are funded not just by our membership, but by, you know, other asking people for money. I mean, you do have to, particularly if you want to hire a professional to actually facilitate. So the issue of funding and fiscal sustainability is an issue, but not as much as you would think. In the villages around the country, people actually do pay a significant amount of money, $800, $700, whatever, to be a member, although some are completely volunteer-led and there's no membership fee. So there are different ways to think about that.
Yeah. And just one more follow-up, Rabbi Geller, a beat on that, because there's some comment around, you know, some of the village models, for example, in the Boston area, seem to be very expensive. Right. Can you speak a little more to the personal economic issues for older people who are not financially well off?
Right. So again, that model is a model where membership is what funds the village. And I don't exactly know what the Boston villages or some of these other villages do, but I assume that there is opportunities for people to have reduced membership or free membership, depending on how else they raise money.
Okay, thank you. What about other responses to the question of overall? Yeah.
I'll let Susan. Yeah.
Brian and I have recently been talking about this, so it's actually a timely question. We have fees for some programs. We offer other programs for free. Anybody who wants to partake in a program, if they're not able to financially, can join any of our programs, so that there's no barrier to participation. We've recently talked about what it might be like to add a fee on for our volunteer programs, because there are changes in funding. And so, and we're very mixed about how we feel about that. Thus far, we have not had a fee for all of our volunteer related programming. So this has been a big question mark for us.
Yeah.
But I will say that one of the things that has been essential for us, I mean, Engage wouldn't exist without UJ, right? UJ, Federation of New York, helped create and then fund this volunteer program, this innovative volunteer program for boomers and beyond, is kind of how they framed it initially. And, you know, that was essential. So I think that if you're able to partner with the larger institutional funders that you have relationships with, the Jewish communal agency in your community, you know, this conference is sponsored by JFNA. So I think that this is something that other federations, like, you know, similar to how UJ, Federation of New York invested heavily in this population. I think other federations could do the same. I think there's some really great models out there, things that could be replicated.
Thank you.
I would also want to say that in terms of a village model, it doesn't really cost a lot of money to have programs. In fact, it doesn't cost any money. Before the pandemic, we would meet in people's homes or apartments. And so you could only have 12 people or 10 people, or depending on how big your house was. And the people who teach or who speak or who share, they're members of the village. We're not paying any of them. So, you know, you're interested in orchids. So 4 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon, if you want to learn about orchids, come to my backyard. Or I'm going to the movies on Saturday night and I don't want to go alone. Meet me in the lobby. You know, those kinds of things is what people really want. Or we're going to take a tour of downtown LA, meet us at the, you know, so it doesn't have to cost a lot of money.
Mhm, mhm. Steph, please.
Sure. So for AgeWell, to call AgeWell, there's no cost to do that. That's a service for the entire Baltimore community. However, I mentioned there's over 40 different programs within the AgeWell network. So some of those, there's no cost. There's a sliding scale. Others, there are membership fees for, like, our Meyerberg Center, for example. So it depends on the service or program. In terms of funding, we received generous support from the Stillman Foundation and the Russell family to help get AgeWell up and running. And as the Federation, we also give each of the partner agencies an AgeWell grant to help with the running of AgeWell.
Mhm. Terrific. And I think this gets at another question. I mean, you're all answering it in different ways, which is really looking at the socioeconomic diversity in terms of engagement with each of your programs, how you're thinking about it, how you're strategizing about it. Any other comments or observations to make about thinking again about socioeconomic diversity in terms of these engagement models? Okay. Okay, I think we've covered that pretty well. Looking back at the chat, and again, just encouraging, we have a couple more minutes with our guests. Other questions I am going to pose, and again, as I pose one, I'm curious too if any of the panelists have questions for each other. But I did want to ask Rabbi Geller, when you talk about the model as an antidote to fears about aging, and you name those fears and you name the benefits. Can you just say a little more about the very genesis of the village idea? Is there anything else that you feel would be important, just philosophically, about a village concept that could be transferable to other communities?
So again, the village notion began in 2001 in Boston when neighbors got together and said, we want to live in our own homes. It turns out that the majority of people, at least in a certain demographic, want to stay in their homes. How long can I stay in my home? I can stay long enough until I can't climb a ladder anymore to change a light bulb. But if a neighbor can come in and change my light bulb, then I can stay for a longer period of time. So villages began, and they became so, Beacon Hill got so many calls that they created the village to village network. And then these villages were studied. There's a big Berkeley study that really suggests that people that have been involved in villages have all kinds of better metrics for everything related to health. And so, so all of that is very significant. The other thing that's significant is that this is a national movement. It's not yet a faith-based movement. Again, so far, we are thinking about this in terms of faith-based communities, but there is the Synagogue Village Network that now has the ability to raise questions for the national vision of aging. There's a Village Movement California that actually is having a conference right now as we speak. There are 60 villages. Again, we're the only synagogue, or we're the cluster of synagogue villages. But these villages in California are beginning to have a significant impact on the master plan of aging for the state of California. People in villages are a community. People in villages vote. People in villages are getting the attention of the legislators who are thinking about policies that relate to growing older. So it is a movement. It is, it's a movement. I mean, and the movement that we are all involved in today, it's like the civil rights movement. It's like the feminist movement. It's like the LGBTQ movement. It's like Black Lives Matter. We are a force for change. And if we think about our work collectively, we can actually be part of changing the culture. And I think this village movement in general and the specific notion of thinking about it in terms of the Jewish community could be part of that.
Wonderful. Yes. Is that a call to action or what? Let me ask last question. I'm just going to pose, Steph, in the chat. Does the AgeWell program only include programs and resources within the Jewish community or in the larger community as well? Can you speak to that?
Of course. So we started, within the Jewish community, going back to that idea of the pilot lean startup process. And the plan is to grow and grow and grow to involve more local partners. Of course, if someone calls AgeWell and we don't have a service or resource that would meet their needs, we are currently already referring people to other resources. So yeah, our plans are just to keep continuing growing.
Okay, terrific. With that, I'm going to thank our guest speakers so much. Please stay with us, everyone. We're going to now segue into a short break. Again, thank you, Steph, and thank you, Rabbi Geller and Susan and Rabbi Fink so much. It is now time to have a 5-minute break. When we come back, we are going to hear from our next round of experts and learn about 3 different active aging models that focus on intergenerational engagement. So hang tight and we'll see you in 5 minutes. And thank you again to our speakers.